There are a ton of curse techniques in Jujutsu Kaisen, and today we are ranking the best of them. I whittled it down to 15 curse techniques that I think stand above the rest, and here is the rubric I used. A couple of things I want to point out really quickly. This is a ranking of curse techniques in a vacuum, so we are not considering the user of the technique or any other techniques a user might possess. For instance, if we talk about infinity, we are just talking about infinity, not infinity plus the 6 eyes. I'm also not taking into account potential heavenly restrictions or unique cursed energy attributes. This is just cursed techniques. So without further ado, let's get into it. Coming in at 15th on this list, we have cursed speech. Cursed speech is the ability to control cursed energy via speech. Go figure. This ability is extremely versatile and its usage mainly depends on the creativity of the person. Commands can be strong like blast away, or they can be weaker like twist. This range of power gives the user flexibility in terms of how much strength each word takes. Which brings me to the drawbacks. Cursed speech is the only technique on this list with definite drawbacks. The damage done to the user's throat scales equally to the amount of cursed energy required to use the words, so stronger words will do more damage than weaker words. On top of this, using cursed speech on a sorcerer or cursed spirit that is stronger than the user requires more cursed energy as well. These two drawbacks also work in tandem, meaning strong words used on strong opponents is even more damaging for the cursed speech user. Next at 14, we have bird manipulation. Bird manipulation is kind of weird. It's a good ability in general because it gives the user absolute control over birds, including recon and more importantly, bird strike. Bird strike has killed every single thing it has been used on except for Gojo. This is how you know it's an extremely strong ability. What makes bird strike weird is the person we see using it. It has been stated a few times that Mei has honed her physical abilities and the abilities of her curse technique to the absolute maximum. This means that what we see of bird manipulation could be the max that this technique has to offer. And while a one-hit kill is extremely strong, its combat potential is not comparable to the remaining techniques. Next at 13, we have projection sorcery. Seeing this technique solo might be surprising, but it's actually pretty simple. Projection sorcery allows a sorcerer to move extremely fast, and it allows the user to freeze opponents for 1 second if they don't follow the 24 frames per second rule. However, this speed is flawed for two reasons. First of all, it's a predetermined path, meaning you don't actually move extremely fast. You choose where you want to move for 1 second, which can be extremely fast. This means if someone has a crazy reaction time, or something unpredictable is thrown in your path, it can cause major issues. The other flaw is that if the user ignores the laws of physics, they too will be frozen. These risks force the user to plan more effectively and limits the sorcerer's options. On top of this, Jujutsu Kaisen doesn't exactly support projection sorcery being a great technique, as every time we see it in use, the user just loses. Like literally every time. This might just be a product of the circumstances the users were put into, but these guys literally go 0 for 5, and that's with an inherited technique. 12, 11, and 10 are the abilities of the disaster curses. I had a hard time deciding if I wanted to include these on the list, because they're a little bit different from regular curse techniques. All three have control over a different element of nature, and all three curses possess a large amount of cursed energy, which can be manifested as said element. It's the large amount of cursed energy that makes them hard to rank, as a sorcerer with a normal amount of cursed energy will not be able to harness their abilities with the same amount of fervor. Regardless, they are cursed techniques, and they are powerful, so they are on this list. I'm going to rank them as fire, plant, and water, based on what we saw. Jogo's lava-based techniques are extremely deadly for most humans, and they are also the most destructive from what we saw. I'm mostly putting Hanami's plant techniques over Dagon because we got to see more of them, and because they seem more versatile than what we saw from Dagon. Now let's get into some of the real heavy hitters, the best of the best, starting with the ability at number 9, Boogie Woogie. Boogie Woogie might be the single most versatile ability in Jujutsu Kaisen. Any two things that have a certain amount of cursed energy can be swapped by this technique. It can be a user and another person, the user and a cursed spirit and a cursed weapon, literally anything. And the user doesn't even have to use their own hand. The only major drawback for this ability is that its effectiveness is 100% on the IQ and battle intelligence of the user. If the user is not creative with this ability or doesn't have a good understanding of their surroundings or how to use them, this technique will be much less effective than what we saw from Todo. At number 8, we have blood manipulation. This is one of the most well-documented abilities on this list. Blood manipulation gives the user the ability to control their blood in a variety of ways, from creating binds to creating piercing bullets, from creating buckshots to using blood as an enhancement for their physical attributes. It can basically be used in any way that might be needed by the sorcerer. This versatility is the main advantage of blood manipulation. The more viable options, the better, and blood manipulation has the most most options of any curse technique so far. However, it does come with a huge drawback, and that is the limited amount of blood. While there are plenty of workarounds like using a tiny amount of blood at a time or carrying additional blood bags, it's pretty obvious that the best abilities available to a sorcerer are the ones that require a large amount of blood, such as supernova or piercing blood. This is a huge drawback as it means 99% of users will not be able to use this technique to its fullest ability, and those that try to risk their lives. At 7 we have Cleave. Cleave is one of the curse techniques that belongs to Sukuna. It is a blade that adjusts its strength to always cut through an opponent in one hit. This sounds crazy, and that's because it is. It's essentially a one-hit kill if used properly. The only drawback we see at this time is that it has to be used in semi-close range. Maybe not super close, but it can't be used from a distance without a domain. Moving on to number 6, we have Ice Manipulation. This ability allows the user to create and control ice, and do so with high precision. From freezing opponents in their tracks to creating enormous icicles, the main advantages of this technique are versatility and its large area of effect. While what we have seen of this technique is limited, we know it is capable of freezing large amounts of people at once and also threatening their lives. An unspoken aspect of this ability that is dangerous is just the properties of ice itself. When things are frozen, they are generally more fragile, and in the case of humans, it also puts them at risk for frostbite and amputation. It is a very dangerous ability, and I think that is made plenty clear in Shibuya. There is one possible drawback, which is that the person we saw using this ability is probably not a great frame of reference. Uraume is one of the ancient sorcerers that has been accompanying Kenjaku since Sukuna was alive. This means she could have spent centuries perfecting her technique, which is a time frame most people will not have. We don't know exactly what she's been doing for the last 1,000 years, but it's unlikely she's been truly alive for the whole time. The truth is, we just don't know how much time she's put into this technique, and as such, we don't know if the proficiency that we saw in Shibuya is attainable within a regular lifetime. Rounding up the top 5, we have the 10 Shadows technique. I've already talked about this technique at length, so I'm going to keep it pretty short. 10 Shadows gives the user an insane amount of flexibility, as well as a large amount of strength. It gives the user 10 Shikigami, which can serve as offense, defense, and support. It also allows the user to withdraw weapons in combat if they were previously stored. Oh yeah, there's also Mahoraga, who is only defeated by a 15-finger Sukuna in his domain. Now there are obviously some drawbacks, like how no 10th Shadow user in history has been able to beat Mahoraga, and how it's an inherited technique, meaning people are more likely to know about the technique and understand how to exploit it. On top of this, if a Shikigami dies, it's dead for good. Yes, its abilities get passed down to another Shikigami, but it is still a major drawback to have to think about how each shadow is used. At number 4, we have Idle Transfiguration. It should be pretty self-explanatory as to why Idle Transfiguration is up here. The ability to one-shot any human on this planet and turn them into almost anything you want is pretty powerful and versatile. You need something pointy? There you go. You need a mouth that blocks an entire hallway? There you go. You need extra help in a 2v1? There you go. The options are pretty much limitless, and as we see in the manga, this ability can cause problems for even the most experienced sorcerers. On top of this, there are really no drawbacks, as it has very few hard counters and even fewer exploits. I guess if you understand how the ability works and how to avoid it, the one-hit kill becomes much less effective, but you could say that about almost any ability. Next up at number 3, we have Copy. This one should also be pretty self-explanatory. Copy allows the user to copy any technique they see. We've seen it be used on abilities that were copied a while ago and abilities that the user just saw. This gives the user a ton of flexibility, but there are a couple potential drawbacks. First of all, it is likely that there is a condition to copy an ability. This would make sense considering the technique's strength, and depending on the condition, the techniques available to copy might be limited. This brings me to the other potential drawback, which is that there might be a power cap on the abilities that can be copied. We've never seen a crazy ability be copied, so it's possible that it just can't be done. But we have no confirmation of these drawbacks existing in the first place. So for all we know, the conditions could be very low, meaning the copy technique could be much stronger than it first appears. In my opinion, the second strongest ability in Jujutsu Kaisen is Infinity. Seeing Infinity up here should be no surprise. It gives the user control over cursed energy at an atomic level, giving them impenetrable defense and unstoppable offense. It is also one of the most documented abilities in Jujutsu Kaisen, as we have seen Gojo use it whenever needed. However, as I said at the beginning of this video, this is ranking individual cursed techniques. So when we talk about Infinity, we're doing so without taking the 6 eyes into account. We don't know exactly what the 6 eyes do, but we know it enhances the abilities of the holder to some degree. We know this because Gojo is the most powerful sorcerer of the last few hundred years, and the last sorcerer of his power held both the 6 eyes and Infinity. This heavily implies that Infinity users without the 6 eyes have been born and have not attained the same proficiency as Gojo. So what ability could possibly be above Infinity? Well, it's curse manipulation. Maybe I just overvalue value cursed manipulation because I think it's cool, but I truly believe that cursed manipulation is the ability that has the most potential to snowball in the show. Let's set up a scenario. A cursed manipulation user takes control of 20 grade 4 curses. With this help, they would have a very easy time taking down a grade 3 curse. They can pretty easily amass 20 or 30 more grade 3 curses and do the same thing to a grade 2. And they can just continue this pattern until they have a decent amount of grade 1 and special grade curses. Even the average sorcerer could follow this kind of progression, but an above average sorcerer like a Geto or Kenny, they make this ability even more threatening. Special grade curses are capable of developing their own domain expansions, meaning a cursed manipulation user could deploy multiple domains without having to use their own. And that's not even mentioning Uzumaki, which allows the user to assimilate the abilities of every grade 1 and special grade cursed spirit. This is another way the technique can snowball. If you absorb the ability of a few special grades, your toolkit will instantly become much more powerful and versatile. This increase of techniques will also make it easier to take down stronger curses, whose techniques can then be added to your own arsenal. The only real downside to this ability is that it's somewhat dependent on the strength of the sorcerer and the strength of the curses available to them. So if they're born in a weaker era, they won't be able to utilize cursed spirits to the same degree. I put a lot of thought into whether cursed manipulation or infinity should be number 1, but the deciding factor was actually in the most recent chapters of Jujutsu Kaisen. A cursed manipulation user can also reinforce curses with their own cursed energy, making even the weakest curses surprisingly strong. And there's also the potential to wield a 150 million soul curse, which I think might put it above infinity even with the 6 eyes. Anyway, that's my list. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, please consider subscribing and let me know what you think of this list in the comments down below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.